Welcome back. Thanks for joining us again. My name is Sarah Helene Dewey, and I grew up here in Albuquerque. My ancestors come from Germany and Scotland and Hungary and England. Today we are going to do some dyeing using beverages that you have in your house. So dyeing is not dyeing like you're dyeing, but dyeing fabric. So you can color fabric using a lot of different materials. Today we're going to use a beverage. So you can use coffee, grape juice. I'm going to use grape juice today. You can use Kool-Aid, you can use dark tea, any kind of beverage that you have in your refrigerator that typically stains your clothing, you can use for this project. I started dyeing fabric a couple years ago with my friend Michaela Seidel. I worked with her in a program. We were making costumes with kids, and she likes to experiment and I like to experiment, and she's a lot older than me, and so I learned a lot from her. I'm still a beginner in this, but I'm happy to share some things that I've learned with you today. This project is going to be for third graders plus. If you're younger than third grade, you can ask a family member or a friend or someone older than you just to help you pour the juice and get set up and everything. Today we're going to need a couple materials, and remember that throughout this process you can pause the video and you can rewind if you need to see anything done again. Today we're going to need a bowl about 6 inches in diameter for our beverage. We're going to need a rag or a paper towel. We'll need an apron to cover our clothing. We'll need access to a kitchen sink and also access to a trash can. We'll need 3 sheets of paper and a dark colored beverage. You'll need about 1 to 2 cups of your beverage or drink. And you can use grape juice, you can use coffee, you can use Kool-Aid, a dark tea, Jamaica, any kind of dark beverage that you have in your house. You can experiment and see how it works. You'll also need newspaper, a tablecloth or a tarp to cover your workspace. 1 to 3 pieces of fabric. You want them to be pretty light. You can have some patterns on it, and you want it to be smooth as possible. So a towel is really textured, and it probably won't work very well. So the smoother and the lighter the better. You can also use an old t-shirt or a pillowcase, or some kind of old piece of fabric that you kind of want to give new life to. We'll also need a fixative. Today we're going to use vinegar, but you could also use salt. Additionally, you can have latex gloves if you'd rather not get your hands in the liquid. You can also use clothespins, binder clips, string, or rubber band to secure your fabric, but it's not necessary. So go ahead and pause your video now and gather all of your materials and come back when you're ready. Some key terms we're going to go over today. One of them is shibori. So shibori, I think it means, translates to wring or squeeze or to press in Japanese. This is a Japanese term, but in general it refers to a series of techniques in Japanese culture to fold and bind fabric, which is then dyed. So you're making patterns kind of in a sculptural way to manipulate a fabric and then dip it in dye, and then you unfold it and it has this really awesome pattern on it. Today I'm not going to call it shibori, because shibori, and you'll see in the pictures, and if you Google it, it can be really complicated and complex and really beautiful. And today we're just going to use that as inspiration for the project that we're doing. We're going to do some folding techniques that are really simple, but inspired by shibori. And I'd also like to say that shibori comes from Japan, but there are many, many different dyeing techniques around the world, and different pigments that are specific to different regions in the world. And each one of us have in our ancestry some kind of dye or technique that we use to decorate fabric that expresses our culture. Each one of us has that. So this one comes from Japan, and yeah, it's pretty cool. The next term we're going to go over is fixative. I said it in the supply overview, but a fixative is just something that helps the dye, whatever you're using, to stick to your fabric better. And there's all kinds of different fixatives. There's chemical ones and there's natural ones. And today we're going to use natural ones. So I'm going to use vinegar, just a splash, and you can also use salt if you don't have vinegar. Cool, so let's get started. First, we're gonna put on our apron or our old work shirts. You can tie back your hair, pull it back, take off any dangly jewelry that you have, or anything that's gonna distract you. So I have newspaper today. You might have a tarp or a tablecloth, but we just want to cover our workspace. And generally I like to go from my elbows out and as far as I can reach. If you're using newspaper, you can overlap it. Cool. So you should have your fabric, a paper towel, your beverage. I have grape juice, some paper, vinegar, and your bowl. And if you have the optional materials, you might have a glove, you might have some clips or rubber bands or string. I have clothespins and rubber bands. You don't need them. So the first thing we're going to do is put our bowl out in front of us. And it's nice to shake your beverage or stir it because sometimes the sediment will settle on the bottom. So we just want to mix it. Make sure your cap is tight. Shake it a little. Open it, and we need 1 to 2 cups. So that's going to look like this. It's about maybe a ½ inch deep. Put your cap back on. And then today I'm going to use vinegar. You can also use salt. You would use a teaspoon of salt and then you would stir it. And if you're using vinegar, you're just going to put a splash. If it's a really big bottle, I like to lean it on the edge of a table and pour it that way. That way I don't have to hold it all with my hand. So you're just going to move it a little bit until you get a little bit in your bowl. And I would swirl it. And this is our fixative today. That's a term that we learned in the beginning, and that's just going to help the beverage, whatever you're using, to just stay in the fabric more. Okay, so we have our juice that's ready. I like to put it on the top up here, and then that way I have a workspace down here. Cool. So now I would just take a deep breath, and you can do some exercises with your hands. I like this one. It feels good. You should feel it right here. And take some deep breaths and calm yourself. Rotate your hands. Maybe they pop. We're going to be using our hands today, so it's just nice to warm them up just a little bit so that they get used to moving around. Cool. So you're going to take your paper. You should have about 3 sheets. This is kind of a warm-up, and it's a way to kind of get familiar with the patterns that we'll be doing. Again, this is inspired by shibori, but there we go. So we'll be folding stuff. So take your first paper and fold it in half lengthwise. Make a crease. If you line up the edges, that works good, and then use your fingertips to press along the fold that you want. Then we're gonna fold this like a fan. I'm gonna fold it one way and then fold it back. And you wanna line it up with the edges. You don't want it to be like crooked. If you do, that's okay. It's gonna make a different pattern. But I'm gonna line it up with the edges for now. And if it goes over a little bit, like mine does, you can just fold it back on itself right there so that it lines up with the edge. Because what we're gonna dye are the edges of the paper or fabric. So we want all of our edges to be lined up. So then you're gonna take your juice and you're just gonna dip the edges into it. And this is just so that we can see what's gonna happen when we do our fabric. I like to press it a couple times, like dip it in there so that we get it nice and covered. And then you can see that mine is dripping here. I just hold it over until it's pretty much done dripping. And you can tap it on the side. And then you want to do that for each edge. And you might tilt it back and forth so that it can get in there. And remember to breathe and be present. Cool. And when you're working, you want to work over your bowl. You don't want to like move all over the place, just to minimize the mess. But then we're going to open it up. So you can see the beginnings of it here. And carefully, sometimes depending on what kind of paper you use, it might be a little fragile. Cool, so when you unfold it, you can see that the juice went on the folds here. So it's a little bit light on the paper, depending on what kind of paper you're using. I think typically like maybe a coffee filter or a tissue paper would be good. But this is just to give us an idea of how it's going to look. So when we folded it like that and we dipped it in the edges, it created like this awesome grid type pattern. Okay, so that's our first pattern. That's one of them. You can put this aside. I'm using grape juice, so it's a little sticky, so your fingers might get a little sticky. You can use your rag or your paper towel just to wipe your fingers if you need to, and keep all of your papers on your newspaper or your tarp. That way you don't get all this rounding all sticky, but this is our workspace, so we'll keep it all here. Okay, get your second piece of paper. I'm going to move my juice out of the way for now. Actually, I'm going to move it over here so that maybe you can see better. Okay, so we're going to do the same thing. We're going to fold our paper in half lengthwise, crease it, and then we're working with the edges again. So I'm going to fold up one side and I'm going to line up this edge to make a triangle here. So line it up, crease it well. Then we're going to flip it over. We're going to do kind of like a fan thing again. And we're going to fold it so that the edges line up. So for me, let's see, was like this, and then I folded it over so that this line matches. These edges all line up. And then you're going to flip it over again. And we're going to fold it back on itself. And then again, so you can see that there's a pattern. At the end, if you have a little extra bit, like it didn't quite reach, and there's this little section here, just keep the pattern going. And I'm going to line it up with this edge. I'm going to fold it back on itself. Cool, so I've got a little triangle. I'm going to move the juice, and now we're going to do our second pattern. So go ahead and dip. We're going to work with the same thing. We're going to work on the edges. Cool, tap it, move it aside, let it drip off. And for this one, mine doesn't quite fit in the bowl. You can see it's a little bit big, so I'm folding it a little bit, just so that it fits inside of the bowl. And you want to let all of the drips come off into the juice. Okay, and let's see. When we open it, sometimes it seems a little messy. It doesn't come out super clear on the paper, but we will get the idea. So now we have this one. So this one, you can see this cool triangle pattern. And because my paper is so smooth, sometimes it bleeds in and it covers it up. But basically where you fold the fabric along the edges, when it's folded and we dip that in the juice or the beverage that you're using, it'll show up on the edges. So we have this cool triangle pattern now. So we've made two. We have a grid and we have our triangles. Cool, so that's the second one. The third pattern that we're gonna do is just a fan. So move your juice aside, your beverage, and we have our third piece of paper. And now I'm just gonna make a basic fan fold here. So right here, and then back on itself. And you want to just fold it until the edges line up. So wherever that is, and it doesn't have to be super, super perfect, but so long as it's within like a half inch of each other. Fold it back, and then we'll fold it back. Cool. So I have basic fan fold all together, and then for this one, because it's definitely bigger than my bowl, I'm just gonna curve it a little bit so it fits in my bowl. I'm gonna bring back my beverage, and same thing, we're gonna just dip the edges. I'm gonna dip this side and this side, and we're gonna see what happens. And then I'll dip the other side. Okay. Cool. So here is my pattern. It's a little clearer on this side maybe. So for this one, it showed up on the edges, so now I have like vertical lines that I made, or horizontal, depending on how you hold it. So if you have more paper, you can continue to experiment with different patterns. And now we're going to move on to our fabric. Cool. Well, actually, I'll just show you. We have triangles, we have vertical lines, horizontal lines, and then we have this cool grid pattern. So those are some options. If you just have one piece of fabric that you're working with, you can decide on your favorite pattern that you want to do. Make sure that your workspace is clean, because if you lay your fabric down, it'll pick up that juice, so you can use a paper towel to just kind of blot it, or your rag. Or you can put down more newspaper, it's up to you. I'm going to fold these. Cool. So I'm going to do the same patterns on my fabric. I have a couple sheets like this. This is a sheet, it has a pattern on one side, and but it's pretty light overall. This is fabric that I cut. So I'm going to do the same patterns, and then I also have a t-shirt that I'll be working with. So for this first piece of fabric, we're going to fold it in half, and then I'm going to fold it like a fan. So you're going to fold it back and forth on itself. Like the paper, you're going to line up the edges. So that's really what we're going to be coloring, and you just want them to line up right here as best you can. it can be within like a ½ inch or so. The smaller your fabric, the easier it's going to be to work with. And if you get to your edge and it doesn't quite line up, or it goes over, you can fold it back. I'm not really bothered by this. That's okay for me. Cool. So now we're gonna bring our juice over here. If you want to use string or clothespins or something, this is the point at which you would use it. You can clip all sides of your fabric to hold it, or you can put on a rubber band just to hold it. Sometimes they're a little weird, so just keep that in mind. The size of your fabric and the rubber bands and the string and stuff. It's not necessary, so I'm just going to do this. My bowl is kind of small, so I'm just going to wrap it a little bit using my hands so I can get the edges in. And I'm just going to hold it for about a minute, maybe 30 seconds. And same thing, you're going to make sure all the drips come out. But you want the juice to absorb the fabric to absorb the juice. And then you're just going to rotate it around. I'm going to do another edge. While I'm doing this, I'm holding the fabric with my hand. So I have my hand up here, holding it all together, and I have this hand pressing those edges together. And sometimes you can squeeze it. Okay, and the edges, so again my hand's up here, and then I move it, and then you can curl it so it fits in your bowl. So you can see that it's starting to color my fabric more. And that's cool. And then we're going to just do the last edge here. And you want it all to drip out. Move your juice aside, and then we're going to open it up. Cool. So that is our grid pattern. You can see here it didn't quite make it all the way through. You can fold it back up as best you can and try again, or you can just work with this. This is really cool. So this is our first one. After you're done with each one, I would set it aside somewhere to dry. Over a chair maybe. You can hang it outside. I'm going to put some newspaper here, just so I can lay it out flat. Okay. Remember, you can wipe off your hands. Cool, so we're on our second piece of fabric, and I'm going to do the triangle fold. So you can fold your fabric in half. Take off this string, throw it away in your trash can. Cool. And then you can fold it in half again if you want. It might not go all the way through. So just keep that in mind, that you might need to dip it a couple times. So for the triangle fold, we're just going to fold this edge down so that these edges line up, and then we'll flip it over. And anytime that I'm working with the fabric, I make sure I have, I'm holding onto it just so it doesn't flop over. There's that, and you might need help with it, and that's okay. Then we're going to line up this edge, and then we're going to line up this edge, so I'm just going to fold it over like that. This is nice, and then I have this extra. So I'm going to line up this edge, and then this edge here too. Cool. I'm going to move that up. I'm going to bring my juice over. And I'm going to curl it a little bit and hold it with my hands on each edge here so I have it kind of gripped, and we're just going to dip that edge and we're going to leave it for a minute or so just so it gets into all of the folds. So one thing that you can think about while we're doing this is that cultures around the world have used different things for creating pigments. Like in Mexico they use cochineal. It's a beetle that has like a pink body. They eat prickly pear, and so they've used that to make a hot pink. You just want to rotate the edges. So I'm good with that one. I'm going to rotate it again. And it's kind of tricky. Cool. So basically you just want the edges to sit in the juice. And if they're doing that, just leave it there for a minute. One plant that's used around the world is indigo. That's what it's used in shibori, and it makes a really deep, beautiful blue, and it's a leaf plant that people boil for a long time, and you ferment it even, which means that it sits and, I don't know, it just sits and ripens, kind of, and people use that for dye. There's all kinds of things that are used around the world, and natural things that we can use for dye. A lot of people use coffee and teas. Cool, and then just keep going with your edges. Okay. Make sure that all of your beverage drips into your bowl. I like to move this aside. Here. Okay, so now, this is still a little bit drippy, so I'm just gonna squeeze it out on the corners. So then we open it. That is really cool. And then we open it again. And that's awesome. So if you did more folds, you would have smaller triangles. And if you have a bigger piece of fabric, it would be a lot bigger pattern. But that is our second pattern. I like it. Cool. This one's looking more dry. It's pretty dry here, so I'm gonna just fold it up and let that dry overnight. And now I'm gonna place this one here on that newspaper. I'm gonna wipe off my fingers, and they're sticky. Okay, now I'm gonna do my t-shirt. So this is a double-sided fabric. If you're doing many double-sided fabric, it might be hard to saturate it all, so we'll see how this goes. You can wipe up your newspaper, and mine is actually really wet, so I'm gonna put one more layer. Okay, so same thing, you're gonna lay it out nice and flat. And if it's double-sided, sometimes there's wrinkles, so just use your hands to smooth it. And I think I'm gonna do it in sections, just because it's a double fabric. So I'm gonna just do this bottom portion today and see how that goes. So I'm gonna do the fan, the third fold that we did. And for fabric, you want it to be pretty big. It's gonna get harder to fold things if you get it like really small. So it's just gonna be hard to handle. So the bigger sections you have, the easier it's gonna be to work with. So that's one, and then I'm gonna flip that over, and I'm gonna fold it back. If this part gets a little messed up, that's okay, because we're gonna work only on the bottom part. And then I'm gonna do it one more time. And really you just want your edges to line up. So I have these two, and then I have these two. So I'm gonna work with this, and actually because it's so big, I'm gonna fold it like this, and then I'm gonna put it in my juice. So bring my juice back, and again, you wanna hold it nice and firm, and I'm gonna drape it over the edge so that that part doesn't get in, and then I'm gonna make it flat against the bottom. And I can see that some sections aren't making it in, so I'm gonna put it a little deeper. Cool. Another thing with fabric is sometimes it'll bleed up because the fabric is so absorbent, it's pulling the liquid up. So that's another reason why it's good to keep your design a little bit bigger when you're folding it. Cool. So that actually got a lot in there. So I'm going to squeeze it out so it stays on the bottom. I'm not going to do it that way, right, because it'll come up. So we're going to work with gravity. It's always good to work with gravity. Squeeze it out. And then I'm going to put that down. I'm going to wipe my hand. It's very liquidy. And then I'm going to open it back up so I can get an idea of where I am. So now I want to do the bottom of this. This line got really, really big, and that's okay. That might end up looking really cool. This section, I'm going to pull up. I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to fold it in half so that it fits in my bowl. And I'm going to dip it, but a little bit less, just so that I have still some t-shirt in here. So I'm going to try to make a smaller line. You want to make sure all your edges are in there and it's looking really good. So yeah, just hold it, and then again I have it kind of draped over the edge of my bowl so it doesn't go in there. And you want it to stay for 30 seconds to like a minute, just so it can soak up some of that drink. And then when you're done, hold it and then squeeze it. Cool. I'm going to put down my fabric. I'm going to wipe my hand. You can also wipe it on your apron if it's something you're going to wash pretty soon. You can also wipe it on your rag if you have that instead. Cool. So I do have some juice left over. I'm not going to drink it because I've been putting fabric in it, so I would dump it outside or in the kitchen sink. For now, I'm putting it right here. I'm going to check this out. So, unfolding it, and then there's my design. So that was a basic back and forth fan fold. And it looks really cool. It has some mustard print from the last time that I did this project, and so it's kind of coming through a little bit. It changes, it changes some of the color the way it overlapped, and that's pretty cool. Okay, so I'm gonna put that down, and this one's pretty dry. I'm gonna fold that up, let that dry overnight, and I'm gonna place my fresh one. Let's see, my newspaper's a little wet. So I'm going to put another piece of newsprint put this on top, let it dry for a little bit, and then we're gonna clean up. So any extra fabric that you have, you can put away. Let's gather our materials. Like I said, you want to dump this outside or in your kitchen sink. I don't have a sink right here in this studio, but I am going to do that. So carefully, maybe with the assistance of someone, take it to the sink or outside. If you're using newspaper, I like to fold it up, and I fold it up inside of itself. And then these papers that I use, I'm going to throw away as well. And fold all this. If you have a tarp or a tablecloth, I would fold it up inside of itself. And you're going to throw it away. And take off your apron. And then this, you can put somewhere to dry. And then sometimes it'll seep through a little bit, so just you can use your rag and maybe a little bit of water and wipe up your table if you got anything on it, and make sure it's not sticky anymore. And that's it. So this is the finished product. You let it dry overnight, and then you're going to wash it like normal, and it'll lighten a little bit, but hopefully it'll still show. So thanks for joining me today, and have fun. You can, in the future, you can think of different ways to like fold it and make new patterns of your own, and you can also experiment with layering things as well. Cool, so today we printed our fabric using a beverage that we have in our house. First, we gathered our materials, we prepared our workspace, we put our beverage in a bowl, we smoothed out our fabric nice and flat on our table, we folded our fabric, and then we dipped it in the beverage in the bowl. We unfolded the fabric, we let it dry overnight, and then cleaned up after ourselves, put all of our tools and materials away, and then we wash and dry the fabric like we normally would. And then you can make things out of this fabric, you can wear the fabric, and you can keep using it. Thank you so much for joining us today. Next time, I'm going to make a stencil using some other kind of thing that you have at home. So stay tuned for future videos, and thanks for joining us, and have a great day. Bye.